Evolution without courage. While the desk Willem had installed in the main building's ground floor was not meant as his own primary workspace, it had grown to become something of the sort. From his private office room within the lecture building, where a perpetual rumbling murmur was consistently present, he longed back to the desk in the main building, where the air was calm and everyone was more reachable. He particularly preferred the place, for he had come to cultivate an image of himself as always being there as the man all could approach to ask for answers or otherwise aid in their matters. But recently he had been forced to relinquish his preference in order to benefit productivity. Everyone at Bergenworth had been overwhelmed with studies, research, inquiries and life-threatening excavations. All thanks to the Thumerian labyrinth. Willem's ambition with this whole institution seemed to have finally reached a long-anticipated apex. To delve deep into the depths of science and knowledge, to uncover what would be perceived as lost or non-existent. Though it was a shame he often marveled in this glory alone in his confined office. He seldom left, simply on the grounds that there was a deluge of work. But of course, few left their own workplaces for the same reason. Then there was a knock on his door. "Come in." When he managed to tear his spectacled eyes from the text before him, he saw Lawrence closing the door behind him. "Lawrence! Finally! I can't bear the suspense. Can you confirm it?" He leaned over his desk eagerly. Lawrence attempted to conceal a smile and dropped a pile of documents on the desk. "Yes, you are right. The Tomb of the Gods." "With links to the modern pantheon?" Lawrence nodded and gestured towards the documents. "And much more, all of which will soon be announced." Willem slowly leaned back with his hands clenched. "Oh, incredible. We've done it, my boy." He stood up and walked with a spring in his steps towards his liquor cabinet. "We must indulge ourselves in a small celebration at this. We've certainly earned such minor respite." He grabbed a decanter halfly filled with golden liquid and 2 glasses. "And don't you protest, Lawrence. We have earned as much, even risked our lives for it." He poured and handed one over to his student. Or perhaps associate would be a more fitting title. "As you say, Master Willem, this certainly is a grand discovery. Or confirmation, rather." They lightly clinked their glasses and sipped from the strong beverage. "Well, I'm sure you've heard it plenty of times by now. But now we can say for certain. No one can doubt now that there is proof." "Oh, I get dizzy just thinking about what's to come." "Perhaps you should brace yourself with the liquor then." "Oh, indeed. But to think, a whole civilization submerged underground. Wonder what that life would be like." He spun around the glass in his hand, with eyes lazily observing the mesmerizing motions. Not to mention living side by side with gods. Yes, indeed. It must have been enlightening. But now I have a presentation to organize. He emptied the glass, but before leaving, Lauren stopped by the door and turned to him, who still stood with the remainder of his drink in the middle of the office floor. See you at the briefing then. He gave a slight wave as Lawrence closed the door. Yes, come in. Maria emerged from the door. I've come with the latest chalice discoveries. She waved about with a bundle of documents. All right, splendid. Let's have a look then. Objects on Willem's desk surface were clumsily brushed aside to make place for the delivered material. Upon a shallow examination, they seemed to mostly be crude drawings and note pieces, compiled into a comprehensible format. We've discovered a new kind of chalice. This one here. She showed an illustration of a chalice that more resembled a small kettle. It was found by a team that delved into the central Thumeru chalice. We have not opened it yet, as we try to see if anything might give a clue to where it may lead. Wise. The progress of the central section should have its course. Have there been more incidents? Not since we first entered. They were quick to accustom themselves to new threats. Despite her efforts to appear formal as always, Willem was quick to detect a pride from her at the Guardian's accomplishments, which made him smirk a bit. That's good to hear. Every time we lose someone to the labyrinths, it takes a toll on my conscience. Yes. But despite that, they are proud to be working for you. He drifted off for a bit, contemplating the idea to be swallowed up by that place. There was a genuine dread that he could distinguish that he imagined he shared with the protectors. Additionally, he wondered if his curiosity was also shared. Anyway, what do the team say about this new chalice? Well, nothing yet. I gather they are eager to see it, of course. But there is likely still so much left where we are, so I wanted your opinion on it. The possibilities are overwhelming us. Our resources limit us. He had angrily began to rhythmically tap his finger against the armrest. I fear we have only witnessed a meager beginning to the horrors lurking in the depths. Take a slow pace. Do not rush ahead. Only go deeper when necessary, or discoveries dry up. Next time an incident occurs, it could very well wipe the whole party out. Sounds like it is resources we need. Quite. Would you begin an inquiry and produce me a ledger? I'll see to it. She bundled up the documents. Oh, and don't forget about lunch, you hear? It would be best if you would come and get me when it's time, lest I forget again. A knocking rattled Willem from nearly falling asleep. The meal he had consumed in all haste had left him drowsy. Another visitor would definitely bring back the energy, whether he wanted to or not. You may enter. He cleared his throat and addressed the knocker. Carol peeked her head in behind the door.
Do you have a moment, Master Willem?
Yes, always for you, my dear. What is on your mind? As she entered, he quickly organized the mess that was his workspace and rested his arm on the wooden surface.
Well, I have reviewed the recent depictions that came in a few days ago, and some things are of note that you would like to be aware of.
She slowly approached his desk and took a seat in front of him. How thrilling! You always bring the most grand revelations. She blushed slightly as she spread out a large depiction of a mural with some notes in the corners. To her chagrin, the wide roll of paper insisted on reverting itself back into the cylinder, and Willem had to, with random objects found on the desk, keep the four corners weighed down.
This was found in a large chamber with several of those arches. And thanks to the protectors, I had ample time to get every detail.
Indeed, the depiction was very detailed, as if ripped down from the very wall it was originally made on.
Take note of this large pattern behind these figures. The pattern forms a single being, and in further studying Thumerian symbols, the flow of the pattern creates a sign that can be interpreted as either somnum or profundum, that is, sleep and deep.
She emitted a short giggle.
Perhaps it could be the same reference and be deep sleep. Just thought of it.
Incredible! These figures, are they of religious significance, you gather?
Yes, but in a special fashion. As you can imagine, many sources paint their gods in a highly venerative manner, but also with a uniquely familiar light, like they truly lived alongside one another. Oh, they really did not record much, so there is no good perspective. But everyone agrees that the way they paint themselves in every circumstance is like servants, or perhaps attendants would be better.
Willem raised his eyebrows and without moving his head looked up at her. Attendants?
Yes, we were so close when we dubbed the place a tomb. In a manner of speaking, it was. For something was sleeping inside the depth of the labyrinth, and in this depiction, that is what the Thumerians are worshipping.
Willem leaned back and looked up into the ceiling with his fingers folded together. It all starts to fall into place. The Thumerians were upon something great. This is an extraordinary discovery, Carol. We must focus more on uncovering the mystery behind this. There surely is more somewhere, if not already here, right before our eyes. All the pieces are yet to be discovered in the labyrinth. An excited look came about in her eyes.
I will look back into what we got and create a new file for this topic.
She calmed herself somewhat before turning up another document.
I also wanted to show you this.
He immediately recognized the simple symbol. A straight line with a dot at its downward end. From the line, two other formations emerged, shaped in a 90-degree angle on both sides that converged at a dot, almost touching it.
This sign has been spotted in several places around the labyrinth, but I have yet to discover what it could mean.
They both stared long at it before Willem uttered reassuringly. The labyrinth is unpredictable. Soon enough a revelation will appear. She took the paper and stared at it for a moment longer.
It's almost as if its meaning isn't to be found. Rather, its meaning is simple, if one were just to look upon it.
She mumbled thoughtfully. One must just look close enough, Willem added. Yes, go ahead. Without looking up from his notes, it was plain to tell it was German that had walked in by the nearly inaudible footsteps. Reports from the day's expedition, Master Willem. He lazily walked straight to the chair and slumped down into it. Any casualties? Not this time. They have grown much more alert since we delved deeper. The new ones too are much more at ease since the last incident. German leaned back and stretched out his legs. If there was an award being given for the hardest struggle for the sake of knowledge, it most certainly would be his. He looked perpetually tired, a feature that could be attributed to him always being seen working hard. And when he was not seen hurrying through the halls of Bergenworth or dealing with the planning of expeditions, his remaining time was spent in the labyrinth. It even looked as if he would fall asleep in the chair right in front of Willem. There has been a request for expansion, he brought up, and German raised his tired eyebrows, sarcastically remarking that was just what he needed. But don't you fret. It's a good thing. I intend to recruit more protectors. The last incident had proven both the level of the labyrinth threat and the capabilities of your training. I am willing to halt further exploration while a more invested course of apprentices is being tutored. Sounds reasonable? He winked the sleep from his eyes, looking rather unmoved by the news. It would smoothen the process. There surely must be an interest by now. Most definitely. I trust your already masterful protectors can attest to the rewards. He nodded drowsily. Besides, soon there will be an increase in funds as we publicize our find. I suspect all of the region's brave adventurers will jump at the opportunity to train and explore the tomb next to you, as well as donors, fellow scholars and rich enthusiasts would want the work to continue. Likely. Training would be simpler this time around. Not the only one anymore. But surely still the master. Willem encouraged, to which he nodded in slight agreement. He sat in the chair with his eyes open, but the body language seemed to convey that of a sleeping man. Eventually he looked up at him. "Do we know if the Guardians truly are the Thumerians?" Willem scratched his chin and looked down briefly at the notes. I can strongly suspect they are. As of yet, there are no stronger candidates. Just, there are so many. All guarding the labyrinth. It's the home of the gods. It is a testament to their devotion. At times, a new expression would overcome his brave student. A student no more, but a young master of his own practice, and with the face of one who had seen unspeakable horrors. Willem himself had yet delved as deep into the lower reaches, reaches that seemed to have no end. He could not begin to imagine how it was to brave the unknown darkness, knowing something with malicious intent observed them, and capable of things no other living creature was. For German's own sake, as well as the expedition's and everyone's safety, training new recruits would give him some healthy distant respite. I will begin right away with the recruitment process. Once the funds pour in, real employment is a reality. German still looked to have his mind with the labyrinth, and less with the businesses of the world above. It must be something truly great they guard. Yes, you may enter. Luna barged in with her usual straightforward mannerisms. Willem was a bit startled by the sudden noise of the door, but regained his calm by discovering the person behind the ruckus. She swiftly sat herself down opposite him. Is the matter urgent?
Not particularly, no. I'm just here to give you my evaluation.
She lay a folder on his desk.
The gist of it is that they are clearly enhanced. They were born just as you and I, but something changed them.
He peeked in the papers she brought. They did it themselves?
Yes. Carryl's interpretations can confirm that. But what I find most interesting is that out of all the features in their bodies, it's the blood that shows the most sign of metamorphosis.
Really? Elaborate, please.
Alright. Their blood shares many aspects of our own, but in addition to everything we expect to find in normal blood, there are also strange types of bodies with indescribable shapes. What I have transcribed will not do them justice. One must see for themselves.
So what is this that they carry?
Comparing different samples from different creatures, we find that those that resemble us the most have very little of this special blood, but others that differ more physically from us have larger quantities of it amongst their blood. This leads me to believe that every Thumerian had access to this blood, or whatever caused the change in its structure. But some of them more so than others.
I've never known blood to permanently change. Considering the cultural significance of blood, could it be they consumed it ritualistically? I still find it hard to imagine how it would change them so.
That is the most popular opinion among my team. But everyone agrees that we don't know for certain. They are a strange people with strange means. Must have been. Whatever they did to themselves, it gave them superhuman traits that mostly manifested in their blood. The exact means of consumption is yet to be discovered in the labyrinth. Everything else is a guess.
You are right, O wise Luna. Everything is a guess until further proof is discovered. He grew silent and a peaceful smile manifested on his face. He thought now that he could see the path, a darkened corridor leading down unendingly towards greater and greater beings, and that descending the depths of the tomb of the gods meant ascension to this greatness.
Here, see, you want to bring your whole body along. Swing with everything you got.
German stepped into Lauren's place in front of the practice target.
Like so.
He quickly swept out his burial blade, like many times before, and slammed up the blade in the handle mounted on his back. As it folded out, his left hand grabbed it over his left shoulder. His right arm placed below the triangular contraption that joined the blade and handle, and stopped for a moment to take a controlled breath. With unsightly speed, he released the grip of his right hand into a swing guided by his left, cleaving smoothly into the wooden pole. The scythe swooped back around him, and he cut once more with both his hands positioned on the handle. The thick might of the burial blade cleaved through the wood. Lawrence meekly held onto his training stick in the fashion of a true novice.
All right. Over here.
German motioned to the next dummy in line, swinging the scythe to rest on his shoulder. How do you suppose I do that? With a stick?
Come now. See what a full body motion can do. Do not underestimate the power of your body. That's what I say.
You are quite a specimen. You know that, Gammon. Never have I seen someone cleave a wooden pole. How can I become as strong, I wonder? He continued, sounding slightly snide. German shrugged.
You know, it's a full body motion. And spirit. Do not forget about the spirit. Commitment is also key.
He positioned the hilt onto both his shoulders to rest his hands over it, silently staring at the new practice target.
And maintain a calm mind, striving to keep clear.
Lawrence swung about the stick meekly, displaying that the answer was clearly not what he wanted. But your strength, Gammon. I mean your strength. Surely that can't be the product of meditation. In his own opinion, it truly was the spirit and mind that he possessed. His entire technique was self-taught, and such ideas had only emerged when he took time for himself, just to think. But few besides Maria could understand that it truly was the cause. Lawrence had long known, but never believed.
Oh, of course not. You have to work to maintain your strength. Also, I do not eat things that make me feel squeamish.
But you'd be surprised by what you happen upon during a silent moment. By now, Lawrence idly swept around the stick in the ground, looking like he was drawing a mindless pattern in the dirt instead of being engaged in the instructions.
Come on, you,
he snapped.
Do what I demonstrated. You saw how my body moved with and into the swing, right? You can do the same. Just feel your weapon. Truly.
Lawrence moved in position and grasped his staff firmly. His first swing almost threw him off balance, but he kept at it, and with a couple more, he started to grasp the meaning, as illustrated in his posture becoming more sure-footed.
There we go. Look at you. Keep this up and you'll get your own trick weapon.
Lawrence stopped, taking strained breaths. Wish I had more time. Would feel much more at ease in the labyrinth. But alas, it seems our time now is already ending. German turned to look towards where his friend's gaze had fallen. Carol stumbled out from the forest. One would think a path had been made at this point, but careful steppings of his accomplices had not allowed the terrain to form after them. She brushed off leaves that had gotten into her blonde, loosely tied hair.
Hi, German. Making progress?
She softly asked in greeting them.
Extremely so. This prodigy right here will be the supreme protector in many expeditions to come.
She looked over at Lawrence and smiled piteously towards him for having to endure such condescending jests.
I promise. Why don't you join us, Carol? You look to have a hidden talent for the flip scythe.
Oh, no, not me. I would not be able to lift that thing to begin with. Besides, I have
Never before had he seen a face turn so red so quickly, and she began to stumble over her own words.
I mean that I have so many others protecting me that in the tombs that it would not be necessary, like Millard, and the Vitus, and you, of course.
She looked down at her feet and nervously twisted her foot back and forth. German and Lawrence looked at one another and raised their brows, smiling faintly. You're right, Carol. Millard is a fine protector, Lawrence remarked, causing her gaze to lower even more and her blushing to worsen. But a warm smile joined her expression. Did you have something on your mind?
Oh, right. Valar's lecture is over, and we are to meet soon in the West Lecture Hall for our presentation.
Were you not supposed to attend Valar's lecture, Lawrence?
German turned to him, surprised. I was done with that a long time ago. In fact, I only attended one lecture. The rest is my own research. I work with him to review the Themerian language.
Oh, right. Been one too many trips to the labyrinth lately. It's like time moves faster while I'm down there.
He laughed it off, even though time had flown since they first came to Bergenworth as hopeful youths. He was no longer a mere groundskeeper, but a protector of the proper, and Lawrence and Carol no longer mere students, but scholars who research the unknown of the world. Ah, do come in. Willem stepped aside in the doorway to allow German and Lawrence entry into his private abode. A homely estate along the shore of the lake, a good distance away from the Bergenworth main proper. "Allow me to pour you something in welcoming spirits. What will you have, lads?" "Oh, whatever you will have will do just fine." Lawrence hung his coat and took a few careful steps after him. "Nonsense. Tell me your preference and I'll surely have it." "Any chance Starridge Creek is available? The kind with honey?" He was pleasantly surprised at German's casual request, and he did indeed possess one. "Fine choice. Follow me." He guided them into his parlor, high ceiling and a wide, dark oak floor with matching furniture, and a grand window facing the lakeside. While directing for his guests towards the dark green sofa paired with 2 armchairs surrounding an oval low table, he himself sauntered over to his oversized collector's liquor cabinet to procure the edition German had requested. "The kind with honey. I believe this specific bottle was given to me by a fellow in Crossfield. We worked together while I was writing the Thumerian line. A bright fellow. Had his origin in the brewing business, and was quite passionate about it."
"Really? You know the creator?"
He walked over to them, placed 3 glasses on the table and poured off the beverage. "Well, he sold it and owns only shareholdings. He is dedicated to history and cheese cultivation, apparently. Gave me much insight from his collection of ancient tomes from older eras." He sipped light-heartedly at his drink. The quaint anecdote alone seemed to have relieved the two from some of their formal stiffness. "How, may I ask, did you come to acquire the taste for this specifically? It is a superior brand, I must admit. One few are that familiar with, unfortunately." German cast a devious side-eye to Lawrence, who returned it with a faint and somewhat embarrassed smile as he covered his face with one hand.
"Well, Lauren's father is quite a connoisseur."
Lawrence shook his head, retaining the partially shameful smile.
"We were much younger then and wanted to, liven up the evening, to put it crudely."
"Yeah," Lawrence continued. "So we snatched ourselves a bottle from his storage. It was completely random. Back then I did not like it one bit. But German achieved a liking for it, and has tried to get his hands on the stuff each opportunity he got afterwards." Willem smiled genuinely, reminded of his own younger days. Despite being mostly forgotten and so long ago, they seemed to grow nearer all of the sudden. "You did finish the bottle, right?" "Oh, but of course." Lawrence shared with his glass and took a respectable gulp. "Quite the story. Perhaps I should schedule an expedition back to Crossfield, so we can stop by the distillery."
"Yes, that will probably not raise any eyebrows,"
German commented, plainly and sarcastically. "Oh, we do it all the time. It is the only respectable vacation we get. Besides, you both do as much work these days as I do. Hence this gathering. You are officially considered workplace associates." He sheared his glass. "What a pleasure." They returned the gesture. He put down his glass after having emptied it. That was, after all, my intentions. Not another rigid institution where the masters demand unwavering respect from their meager students, but a place of true learning for all involved. You see how we already have breached the borders of what was known. I firmly believe it would not have been possible for any other organization. It has been most fulfilling, even though I did not become as learned as I hoped. I believe it was meant to be. I know you well, Gammon, and you would not be content in any old workshop. The way I see it, this is exactly the challenge you need. I would very much agree with that. There was a hunch back in the day when you two stood in my old office. It is my hunches that have made Bergenworth possible from the beginning, and thus I value their insight. Quite astute of you. Did you envision that the most proficient fighter in all of Yarnam stood before you then? No. They are not very specific. Just a notion. What I mean is that little voice or calling that sometimes tells you or urges you to do something, despite what logic may dictate. I know what you mean, Willem. German finished his glass and leaned back on the couch. It is funny to speak with others about it. Insight, the sixth sense, or whatever one could call it. But since it is there, it must be something very real. And the more I listen, the more I feel like I'm growing. Very good, German. Another? He removed the cork of the decanter with a satisfying plop and held it towards their glasses. German nodded. Lawrence quickly swept down the last of his glass, suppressed a coughing fit, and placed the glass closer for him to pour. It may sound strange, but at times I found myself loath the conformities of science. You discover one thing and take it as a fact, which is all well and good, but I think it can at times place a restraint on the mind that prohibits further and grander ideas. Lawrence started smirking as he was captivated by the swirling liquid in the glass he held before him. None of that exists at Bergenworth, he said snarkily. I established Bergenworth to escape what was expected and what was norm. I wanted to think alone and did not need those pesky side eyes. Reminds me of my younger tutelage years. Though I can look back at my time at the university with charm, there still were those aggravating traits plain to see. Was it not the insufferable aura of prestige? Then it simply was the haughtiness that made them pursue a scholarly trade. Never with a real curious agenda. My former classmates, that is. I have always said, you'll not find the pure scholar, for he is not interested in finding you. He finds the truth. Clever. Lawrence chuckled and raised his glass. And perhaps that is their greatest bane. Such a scholar would not have found German to brave the labyrinth after all. German nodded absent-mindedly and took a quick sip. It fell quiet, and the ticking of the room's grand clock was allowed to occupy the space of sound solely. "But German," Willem asked eventually, "if I may resume a previous thought, in line with what is expected of a scholar, few ever trust their instincts as you just explained. How about you, Lawrence? Know much of it yourself?" He looked up to the right and proceeded to shake his head. "Perhaps, only slightly. I prefer to piece together the things in front of me, as you might already know." "I would say German might know more than I. But have you ever noticed that once you act upon instinct, or follow that strange arcane notion, you achieve the purest of things? Like it was the hand of God, showing you your way in this world. There are many good reasons for being religious, and for me, I believe that one day it is within our nature to evolve our intellects to a higher state." The Thumerians certainly seem to be upon something of the like. "Exactly. Perhaps they were upon a truth we are meant to unlock." He poured himself another glass and pushed the bottle closer to the others. German lurched forward to accept. "Our minds are extraordinary, but they might not be capable of such immense growth on their own. I believe the secrets of the so-called gods of Thumeru would help us. If we can prove their existence, this wish will come true as we have the chance, through hard work, to deserve their great state." German sipped leisurely from his glass while Lawrence had his whole attention directed at Willem, entranced by his words. "Then one could say it is human's destiny to transcend. It seems only logical if we already have that capability inherent in us." Willem nodded. "That is one way to put it." "Incredible. Wonder how far the Thumerians got. We have already seen their superhuman strength. Perhaps it was inherent to them as well. Something that they were meant to unlock." Willem delighted in the young spirit. Even if he seemed to have created his own slight variation, it was harmless thinking. He had understood his desire, and that was a precious thing. With his arms crossed, German stood tall, gazing over the recruits. Another batch of novices, 8 of them, dueling one another in pairs to hone their abilities, while Vitus wandered between them over the labyrinth floor. When he saw them here, they were so much different from his first group. It was in their eyes he thought to know them and what they had within themselves. It was not how they occasionally would sneak glances to a darkened doorway with a longing. It was something more persistent, something that betrayed a particular arrogance, an arrogance unfortunately only fear would quell. A fear that would save their lives. "Time!" he called, and they stopped. Their posture still intact, and breasts not yet heaving.
Split in groups of 4. Crowd control,
he declared in a not so loud but firm voice. The 8 divided themselves accordingly, where one was surrounded by the other 3 in their party. Those that surrounded fetched protective gear for their heads, arms and legs, while the last fetched a wooden weapon of his choosing.
Begin!
The 3 started to assault the middle member in various ways, at times attacking all at once, at times only one. They smiled while doing so, chatting between breaths. Vitus skulked behind them to make sure the momentum was not lost upon them. He only seemed focused on their form of combat, which admittedly was tolerable. But German was continuously perturbed by their faces, and mostly their eyes. He cast a glance at Vitus and saw a firm gaze, one with intent, but also one with a hidden terror. Vitus seldom talked about what he thought of the labyrinth, or at least had stopped doing so. Perhaps it was for the better, but all the same, when German looked back into the eyes of the new students, there was a wavering in his own gaze. He knew that something was once lost to himself down here, and that something took its place. At times he wished reality was different, and that the horrible halls had not caused such a sensation within him, but the same wish was always followed by the staunch affirmation that in truth he would not want to be any other than who he was in the moment. He knew that without that terror he would not be the man he was. But he took the terror upon himself to grow as a being. Was it then truly right to bestow such terror unto another? For he knew that soon enough the spark he thought to see in their eyes would have to fade and be replaced with that particular terror, lest the luster of their eyes went dark entirely.
Keep your feet about you.
Vitus cracked the staff at the heels of a lousy stepping student.
Don't stop moving. Offense is defense, never idle.
German sighed and walked towards the next chamber. They all hesitated and looked at him as he moved.
Keep at it, lest you never be ready,
Vitus ordered and hurried after him.
Going far? No, just need to clear my head. You're doing great with them.
He nodded and reluctantly turned back to the obtuse students. He walked into a long corridor. He had been before and knew where it led. He entered a round chamber with dirt flooring. It was dead silent. Uncommon for the labyrinth to be entirely silent, in fact. It made it more uncomfortable for some reason than hearing the harrowing moans and screams of distant creatures. The ceiling was too covered in dirt, and the chamber more resembled a cave with built stone walls. Roots dangled and slithered in and out from above. 4 arches were built into the wall evenly around the circular chamber, one of which he had entered through. The rest held exposed dirt, as if they were meant to one day be excavated and expanded through. But German had discovered a neat quirk with the room. One of them, the one precisely across him upon entry into the chamber, was a clever illusion. A fabricated thick door with a simple layer of dirt that, upon remaining closed, appeared as a blocking of dirt. Said cleverly crafted deception could be slightly pushed inwards. He had discovered it alone some days prior, and had proceeded to venture beyond. He had, of course, planned to register the find, but had decided to delay this particular documentation. Beyond was a wide hallway filled with mist. Not out of the ordinary, as there was a certain cloud phenomena that appeared in the labyrinth. But this particular place was especially foggy. The few times he had been here, he had felt a presence. Not one of sentience, but rather that the smoke itself emitted the feeling. He walked inside and sat himself down in the middle of the corridor floor, amidst the thick mist. It swirled around him, moving gently, but with a lack of any discernible breeze. He could think of new things while he was here. Things that would otherwise not come to mind approached his consciousness exceedingly natural. He focused and delighted in the new experience he believed would not be encountered anywhere else. He pondered little of what it could be, or made up any explanations of his own. He simply allowed it to tell him of itself. This being his third visit, each having been a session of hours of stillness. Now he felt he knew what his presence was about, what it had conveyed. He stood and moved his hands through the fog around him. It moved out of his way, and he focused on the things he had heard in his mind. The fog moved with him, and he leapt forward, into the fog, with the fog. Maria looked through the small round cylindrical vials, holding the precious crimson. The Thumerians definitely held blood as the form of highest medium of worship. Individual properties and significances now only left with the rotted minds of the old creatures of the depths, or lost entirely in between the rows of history. With an instrumental syringe, she pierced the cork to extract the liquid and placed just a drop on the tiny glass frame to be slid under the microscope. Peering through the lens proved to be not much of a variation from the blood of humans. The significant property as seen on such a minuscule level was its persistent motions, and a much more fervent motion at that, as if still held within a bodily host, as if alive. It was curious, but at the same time she expected little else from such supposedly extraordinary blood. Then again, the blood was incredibly similar, which would in turn mark the Thumerians as kindred. She was caught in her rampant thoughts by knocking on the doorframe to the laboratory.
"Pardon, Lady Maria. Time to spare?"
Cromley peeked around the corner with the brim of his hat so low that only his pointed goatee was visible from underneath.
I do. What is on your mind?
He walked inside.
Was about to head to the course, but we have been there some time now. The bunch is doing well, but they will soon need that little extra.
Oh? She folded her elegant fingers together and rested her chin upon them, elbows planted on the table surface.
Miss me already?
He smiled, embarrassed under the thick greyish moustache.
I suppose. No, but the apprentices are not a bother. Rather, I am not quite a master as you and German. Was wondering if there was some advice for a novice master.
Right, of course. What I have come to learn was like German always said. There is no proper way to mastery. You just take on new challenges. And a good master knows what is challenging. Always be a step ahead of them, as an obstacle. In doing so, you learn them to push, and more specifically, to push themselves. You as master can in reality do little for them. You know how it was, to find your own strength.
He nodded, ponderingly looking down to the side.
I'll try and come by as soon as I am done with my other businesses. Then we will see about doing something fun. But it's not about having imagination to find new ways. Goad them into contesting with each other, against each other's own strength. Make everyone want to be the best. And that's what we did with you.
He chuckled.
Yeah, surpassing you and Master German. Quite a carrot. But impossible, I'd say. But I get it. They seem to be doing fine. Perhaps it is just me.
Gravenness replaced the cheeriness. Grim thoughts seemed to take his mind.
I want them to be ready, you know, for the labyrinth. It ain't easy down there.
Oh, Cromley, you have no idea. They will never be ready. But you can prepare them. Besides, we will be there too. Just keep it up.
She sat up straight, more properly. He grunted.
I just wonder. After my first trip, I wanted to leave. But I couldn't.
He shook his head and reassured his expression.
What I mean is that it was good for me to see it and live it. But I fear they don't have the same drive, you know?
She examined him motionlessly.
By now, they know the threat. It is them that chooses this. But when they stare into those terrible faces, and you see that fear takes their body, Cromley, you'll be there for them. They must learn through fear, and when they do, it is your compassion that saves them. Understand?
He nodded slowly and flashed a genuine smile.
I do. I'll catch you later then. And thanks.
She nodded and he tipped his hat slightly before turning and leaving the room. She thought a bit about the labyrinth and those that would be sent down there. She left the topic quickly, however, as it never amounted to a pleasant state of mind. She averted her eyes back into the lens. Reminding herself of the qualities, she made some notes of the thoughts around them. It was near mesmerizing to look upon such blood. A breeze must have come through an open window, or at least that was the nature of the sound that flew into the room. She looked up to the immediate right towards the window as the sound caught her attention. But the windows were closed, and before the table stood German, causing her to jump in her seat at his uncanny emergence.
Gods! Don't!
Scared you? He leaned with one arm resting on the table, the other held on his side.
You did. Goodly so.
I have something to show you. Up for a session? She briefly looked down at what she was doing.
Well, I was trying to follow up on my thesis.
Any luck?
Oh, not really. I surmise it will simply take more time.
What I have to show you will not take as long. You'll be back with this in a much clearer mind, I assure you.
All right.
Giddily, she jumped up from her seat. The blood would need to dry anyways for the research. As they made for the workshop, German seemed abnormally light in his steps. Next to him, she felt almost as a clumsy novice, despite being considered by others as more agile in comparison. Together they flew past students in the lecture hall main floor and out in the cool midday sunny weather, appearing surely as two schoolchildren on their way around the corner of the grand building. You'll need your gear. Gonna head into the labyrinth for this one, he announced over his back. In front of them, the workshop began to emerge behind the trees.
Really? Why ever?
There is something new you should know. They both barreled inside the small entry of the house, spacious enough to have been converted into their personal armory. It was here both their Akuyo and burial blade rested side by side on the wall. A door that remained permanently closed was on the opposite side of the 10 feet wide and long room, as German would only enter into the living area through the workshop anyway. On the door hung his attire. Instruments such as munitions and their firearms lay in the large armoire, along with Maria's attire and other articles of their work.
Full gear?
She opened up the 2 armoire doors, causing tools and protective gear hanging on the inward side to clatter by the force. No, just for a visit.
A visit? Sounds awfully casual.
It will be. She tossed on the base layer of her standard attire. It felt more like work clothes than protective gear in the light he made it out as. They left the workshop lightly armed, heading for the lecture hall basement.
Anything else I should know? That is, if you plan on ever telling me.
It's tricky to explain. I gather it's unlike anything you've ever seen.
Oh, truly? Unlike what I have already seen.
I wager. At the back, where the western wing lay deep within the forest, was also a secondary cellar entrance. The part it led to had been sealed off from the rest of the building, in precautionary purpose to the fact that chalices in use rested there. But with the non-existent incidences of creatures emerging from them, would suggest they perhaps were incapable of leaving, or simply refused to do so. Few lights glowed down there, making the staircase descend into unforeseeable darkness. Reaching its end, however, would yield sight from lone candles further inside. It bore some appropriate resemblance to the labyrinthian halls. On the altars were several candles, making the chalices shine conspicuously. The room had 6 pillars that arched in between each other, making the foundation for the ground floor above. At the end wall was a door, now sealed, that led further inside the basement level. On the same wall were situated small altars, one on each side. Several more lay against the walls on both long sides, each having a bundle of burning candles placed upon them. Not all of them held chalices. They would periodically be removed as they were drained of new findings. German walked up to one of the chalices of the central Thumerian region.
Let's go. This one.
He knelt down and reached for it with his hand gently. Slowly did his form become transparent. More so the closer he reached the chalice, blurring in with reality until he was no more. After counting to 5, she did the same. She closed her eyes as she reached for the chalice. Having kept her eyes open on the very first interaction with the old magical means of Thumeru, she had found that witnessing the molding and shifting realities before her waking eyes brought about a terrible nausea and a brief headache, provoking her as well as many others to simply let the arcane nature of the chalices do their work unquestioned. She was well familiar with the section they now found themselves in, as the current place hosting the new trainees. Learning above ground had quickly grown out of fashion, since the labyrinth were the singular place holding the adequate training implements, namely the labyrinth guardians. Hence the part was seldom occupied by others than humans, successfully having claimed part of the labyrinth as their own with their frequent activity. Now, however, they seemed to be alone from both the presence of the natives and their own peers. German walked through the halls as if he had a specific destination in mind, but not too decisively as he looked carefully around every corner. On his way through a large chamber, he stopped in the middle of the floor and spied around. She walked up beside him, desiring his attention, and reached out her hand dignifiedly towards him. He took hold of it and continued on his way.
"Come on now, is it far?"
she asked lightheartedly, but just as she had finished the question, she suddenly lost grip on him. Her hand previously held his, now tightened in on itself, no longer in possession of his warmth. Traces of smoke floated in the air until they evaporated completely. She turned around to see him stand some 10 feet behind her. She saw his body preparing to jump sideways, but it would turn into smoke instantly as he left the ground. His form completely vanished and transitioned into a projectile cloud, swirling forward in a path of 10 feet away from her. She only managed to catch sight of him as he was making ready for another leap. An image blinking in and out of reality before he was smoke again. This time, he appeared by her side once more.
There you have it.
My, it's magic.
I suppose.
How do you do it?
I became aware of it, here in the labyrinth.
He smiled and broadened his arms out to the surroundings.
But how?
She briskly moved closer and lightly patted on his chest and up towards his shoulder, all while he smiled smugly.
You are still here. How did you just vanish?
Her tone had grown to sound more and more accusing and irritated. She only became aware of her hostility when his arm slumped to the side with a questioning reaction upon his face. You seem off, Maria. Not nearly as excited as I thought you would be.
What? Oh, no.
She backed away from him and lay a hand embarrassingly over her face.
No. Please. It's me. I am sorry. I just thought of home and...
She stopped herself. When she eventually looked up to face him, he stared straight into her eyes, but kindly so. What of home?
I suppose I never told you. I apologize once more, but I rather it stayed at home, in memory. But this made me remember.
His eyes silently requested for her to continue.
It's nothing like this, whatever you do, but it is equally strange. The kind of strange I only thought existed in Canehurst.
She inhaled deeply and looked down.
The nobles do not show it, but they are obsessed with blood, to the point they wield it, like magic.
His head turned up slightly, like he now understood.
It is vile. It changes them, or at least it corrodes them. I have seen it, and oh, was I afraid of it, their vile blood.
He stepped closer. I think I understand, Maria.
My old mentor, he had these cuts all over his hands. Because of the blood art, he said. It took his own blood and strengthened his weapon with it. I never tried, nor wanted to. It seemed just so vile.
Her voice quivered slightly, and she hoped that he had not noticed.
He was a skilled swordsman. He did not need to harm himself as he did. I think it even took a toll on his mind in the end.
I understand. He vanished out of her view. She heard him right behind her. This is nothing like that. When she turned, he was gone again. A faint tug at the back of her head. Her ashen hair fell down loosely. He had untied her bow. She spun around. The trail of smoke flew away and he re-emerged with the ribbon in his hand. The nobles do not have this much fun, do they?
German!
She ran towards him, composing her smile. He effortlessly vanished once more. You'll have to keep up.
All right. Show me then. How do you do it?
He reappeared in front of her and took her hand. With his touch, her mind completely left behind what lingered from those days, and she smiled back at him.
Come and I'll show you.